Welcome to the Depth Dive. Today we're embarking on a journey into a concept that's really kind of haunted our collective imagination for, well, over 2 centuries now. The Frankenstein Barrier. Now, this isn't some physical wall, right? And it's definitely not a secret society or anything like that. Instead, it's this really crucial, often quite blurry ethical line. It's where legitimate scientific inquiry, risks tipping over into something forbidden or dangerous, or maybe fundamentally inhumane. I mean, the name itself, Frankenstein, it instantly brings up these images, doesn't it? Hubris, monstrous creations, things going disastrously wrong. It's become this really profound cautionary myth.
Yeah.
And it keeps echoing with every new technological leap we make. So, okay, let's dig into this. Let's unpack where this fear started, see where it shows up today, and figure out how we as a society are trying to navigate it all.
Yeah, and to really grasp the Frankenstein barrier, you absolutely have to go right back to the source.
Yeah.
Mary Shelley's novel, Frankenstein, published way back in 1818. You've got Victor Frankenstein, this brilliant, really ambitious young scientist, and he becomes completely obsessed with, well, the secret of life itself. So he sets out to build a sentient being. He's driven by this huge desire to, quote, pour a torrent of light into our dark world, thinking maybe he can conquer death or even create a whole new species.
But that scientific triumph, as the story always goes, it just immediately spirals into tragedy, doesn't it? What was it about Victor's reaction right at that moment that sort of set the stage for everything that followed?
Well, it's his immediate disgust, isn't it? His repulsion. The second he animates his creation, brings it to life, he's just horrified by how it looks. He runs away, he abandons it, leaves it completely alone, totally unprepared for the world. And the creature, despite being, intelligent and actually quite sensitive, it turns violent, but out of despair, right? Ostracization, this desperate need for acceptance. So Shelley's novel, it wasn't just like a spooky story for the time. It was this incredibly deep commentary on the scientific advances happening all around her, the Industrial Revolution. It asks these timeless questions. Things like, just because we can do something, should we,
Yeah.
And what are a scientist's responsibilities to their creation, sure, but also to society as a whole? So the Frankenstein barrier really is precisely that ethical threshold where science risks becoming this act of, well, playing God without thinking through the huge moral and societal consequences, which are often completely unforeseen.
That blurriness you mentioned, that feels really key. It's not a sharp red line, is it? It's more like this dynamic boundary. It shifts depending on our values, our understanding, our technology. And one of the big things that defines that sort of forbidden side of the barrier, it's this idea of unforeseen consequences, just a total lack of foresight. Victor Frankenstein's biggest failure wasn't even creating life, arguably. It was his complete failure to think about the creature's needs, its place in the world, how people would react. He was just so wrapped up in doing it, he totally ignored the aftermath.
Exactly. And you see this translating into very real concerns today, all the time. Think about potential ecological disruption from GMOs, maybe, or the societal disruption from advanced AI leading to, massive job losses. Or consider an AI, say, designed to approve loans. If you train it on historical data, which might be biased, well, it could accidentally just perpetuate those biases. You end up with a sort of digital redlining that no human actually intended to code in. It also brings up these ethical slippery slopes, doesn't it? Where one step, seemingly okay, could pave the way for much more questionable stuff later on. The Frankenstein barrier forces us to ask, okay, what are the worst case scenarios here? And are we actually prepared to deal with them?
And this idea of unforeseen consequences, it often links up with that deeper fear, doesn't it? The whole playing God thing, messing with nature. Victor Frankenstein literally took on the role of a creator. Today, you see that concern cropping up really powerfully in areas like, say, human germline gene editing, where changes you make to DNA in embryos could be inherited, passed down generations. That raises huge questions about altering the very essence of, well, what it means to be human.
Which brings up a really important point. Is that playing God accusation always a legitimate ethical concern? Or is it sometimes just, a societal fear of the unknown? Even when the science might actually be beneficial, where do we draw that line between responsibly managing nature and, well, usurping its role entirely? You see this with attempts to create totally new synthetic life forms, or efforts towards cryogenics, trying to reanimate the dead. These things really push the boundaries of life and death. They often raise more philosophical questions than purely scientific ones. That playing God accusation, I think, often reflects a kind of societal discomfort. A discomfort with humanity holding powers we usually associate with, the divine or the fixed laws of nature.
Okay, so beyond the sheer power of creation, the barrier also touches on something else, something really heartbreaking in the story: dehumanization and exploitation. It's not just about what science can achieve, but how it's done, the respect we owe to research subjects. When people or groups are just treated as a means to an end, well, that barrier has definitely been crossed.
Oh, absolutely. And history, sadly, gives us some terrible examples. Think of the Tuskegee syphilis study. African-American men deliberately left untreated for decades just to see how the disease progressed, even after a cure was found. Or the horrific Nazi medical experiments during World War II, just unspeakable atrocities committed in the name of science. Even things that seem less extreme maybe, like the Stanford prison experiment, that showed how fast people could fall into abusive roles, raising huge concerns about participant welfare. And of course, unethical animal testing is still a worry in some areas. All these examples, they just underscore that human dignity, well, it has to come first, always.
And thinking back to Victor again, besides the hubris and the abandonment, he also did all his work in secret, total isolation. How critical was that secrecy, that lack of peer review to how things ended up? And what does that tell us about science today?
Oh, it was absolutely critical. Huge factor. In modern science, this translates into concerns about, say, conflicts of interest that aren't disclosed, or data being manipulated, outright fraud sometimes, or just a lack of public engagement when really groundbreaking, potentially disruptive research happens behind closed doors. That's why the scientific community now really tries to emphasize transparency, through peer review, open access publishing, ethical oversight bodies like IRBs, institutional review boards. These are all meant to be essential checks against that kind of secretive, unchecked ambition that led Victor Frankenstein so badly astray.
Okay, so let's shift from those historical lessons to right now. Where do you see the Frankenstein barrier being tested most vividly today? I'm guessing artificial intelligence has got to be pretty high on that list. As AI systems get more and more sophisticated, they can learn, create, even make decisions. These fundamental questions are just exploding, aren't they?
They absolutely are, yeah. I mean, think about autonomous weapon systems, so-called killer robots. Should we actually develop AI that can independently find and attack targets without any human empathy or moral judgment in the loop? That's a classic just because we can, should we kind of dilemma. And it's the idea, still mostly theoretical, thankfully, of truly conscious AI that raises just profound ethical questions about their rights, their potential suffering, what we might owe them morally. I mean, what happens if we create something that can genuinely feel and think, but is totally dependent on us, or even feels, exploited? But even beyond those big existential questions, we have immediate worries like AI algorithms trained on biased data that just reinforce discrimination, or the very real potential for widespread job displacement as AI takes over more tasks.
Right. And then if we look at other cutting-edge areas, where else is this barrier really being pushed? For a lot of people, I think gene editing jumps straight to mind. The development of these incredibly powerful tools like CRISPR-Cas9, they're like molecular scissors, right? Letting us edit DNA with amazing precision. That's really sharpened the focus on the Frankenstein barrier dramatically.
It really has. And there's a crucial distinction we often make. There's somatic gene editing changes to body cells, not sperm or eggs. That's generally seen as more acceptable for treating diseases because the changes aren't inherited. But then you have germline editing, changes to sperm, eggs, or embryos. Those would be passed down through generations. And that remains highly controversial because it's irreversible and we just don't know the potential long-term effects on the human gene pool. Plus you get into the whole designer babies debate, the potential to select for specific traits, raising really serious concerns about eugenics, about creating new social divisions. And we still worry about off-target effects, basically, unintended changes elsewhere in the genome that could be harmful in unpredictable ways.
And it doesn't start with just editing humans, does it? There's work on creating human-animal hybrids or chimeras, even growing human organs inside animals for potential transplantation. That pushes this barrier too. Like, if a pig had a significant number of human brain cells, what would its moral status even be? Would it experience consciousness differently? Would that demand different ethical rules?
And that leads straight to the question of the dignity of life itself, doesn't it? Is it ethical to create beings, potentially sentient beings, mainly just to serve as a source of spare parts for humans? These are the frontiers. This is where the Frankenstein barrier is being actively navigated right now. And often there's just no easy consensus.
So, okay, given all these really complex issues, how do we actually try to guard this barrier as societies, as scientists? What safeguards do we even have?
Well, the most direct way is through formal ethical guidelines and laws, regulations. We mentioned institutional review boards, IRBs. They review research with human subjects, make sure there's informed consent, try to minimize risks. Many countries also have national bioethics commissions. They advise governments on these really thorny ethical questions. And for tech with global reach, like gene editing or AI, international agreements become really important to try and prevent, a race to the bottom where someone ignores ethics to get ahead.
And it's not just about writing down rules, is it? It sounds like avoiding Victor Frankenstein's isolation is also crucial. So fostering open, ongoing conversations between scientists, ethicists, policymakers, and importantly, the public. Scientists need to be able to explain their work, right? The benefits, yes, but also the risks in a way people can understand.
Exactly. Public engagement is key. Things like citizen science projects or deliberative forums where people can really discuss these issues. That can help shape ethical frameworks that reflect what society actually values, not just what scientists want to achieve. And the media has a huge role too, reporting on breakthroughs responsibly, avoiding the hype and sensationalism that can just muddy the waters. This also feeds back into ethical education within science itself. Future scientists, they need to grasp not just the technical stuff, but the profound societal impact of their work. Learning from past mistakes like Tuskegee, grappling with philosophical ethics, really embracing responsible innovation, it's all vital.
It sounds like just acknowledging limits, acknowledging uncertainty is a massive part of guarding the barrier too. That danger of unchecked ambition, that belief that science can just solve everything without any negative consequences.
Look, the Frankenstein Barrier, it isn't some fixed line drawn in the sand, agreed upon by everyone. It's not a destination we arrive at. It's really a constant dynamic conversation, an ongoing process. It represents this inherent tension, doesn't it, between our very human drive for knowledge, for progress, and our equally vital need for, wisdom, for responsibility, for compassion. And every new scientific breakthrough, every new technological frontier, it brings you, the listener, closer to this blurry line. It forces these fundamental questions about what it means to be human, what we owe to anything we might create, and ultimately what kind of future we actually want to build together.
So what does all this mean for you? Especially as new discoveries keep emerging faster and faster, it seems. This ongoing vigilance, this careful navigation of the Frankenstein barrier. Maybe it's the greatest ethical challenge facing science in the 21st century. So the question to leave you with is, what questions will you ask when you hear about the next big breakthrough? And what responsibility will you embrace to help ensure that our pursuit of knowledge truly serves the betterment of humanity?